Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our Career Booster webinar series here at Grantham University. Today we're presenting our Academic Insider with the Mark Skousen School of Business. Woohoo! Just to get things started, you will be able to ask questions throughout the presentation. There is a question feature as well as a chat feature built in the GoToWebinar software. So at any point during the presentation, feel free to ask your questions, and we'll address those either during or towards the end of the presentation. This session will be recorded, so they will be available to you shortly after the presentation, and you can also view this and other presentations on our YouTube page under Career Booster. So we're going to go ahead and get things started. Today's objectives, we're going to talk about new developments within the Mark Skousen School of Business, some tips for academic success, degree program updates and highlights, industry and insights for career achievement after graduation, and much more. My name is Jeremy Bell, Career Services Manager, and I will be moderating today, along with Doug Demler.
Hello, how are you?
Career Services Coordinator here at Grantham, and our special guest today is Dr. David Marker, Dean of the Mark Skousen School of Business.
Thanks, Jeremy. Happy to be here.
Awesome, glad to have you. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to this point.
To this point in my life?
Yeah.
Thanks. Well, again, thanks a lot, and I really want to encourage everybody who's online to send in questions. I have very little opportunity to meet with students, and when I do, I enjoy it immensely. I love meeting with students and hearing about their concerns, their desires, their hopes, and their fears about business education. I was a business person working for my father in his business when I decided that I wanted to go back to school. And so I went back to school and earned a Bachelor in Business Administration from Baker University. And then I got a Master's in Organizational Behavior and Total Quality Management from the University of Kansas. And I continued to get my PhD at the University of Kansas. And while I was at KU, a group of people came from a partner school in the middle of France, and they were searching for somebody to come over and participate with their faculty. So during my studies, I went and spent a semester abroad, and I believe that I checked off my
bucket list.
My bucket list of necessities for your CV. When you're an academic, you have to have international experience. So I did that. And I came back to KU, finished my dissertation, and I was teaching at KU. And the school kept calling me to come over and help them with a project they had. So I signed a contract to go to the ESC Clermont-Ferrand in Clermont-Ferrand, France, the very center of France, to help them obtain business programmatic accreditation for the school. And I ended up staying there 13 years, almost 14 years, and became the dean of that business school.
Nice.
And my family and everybody had moved back to the U.S. in the Kansas City area, and so my wife wanted us to move back as well. So we moved back here, and I was working at several area universities and doing some what I thought were interesting things, when I met a fellow that I had done some consulting work for, and he was working at Grantham. And he said, you should come meet the dean of our business school, Nicole Buckley, at that time. And so I came in to meet with the dean and the dean of foundations faculty, and we talked, and it was a really interesting meeting, and they offered me a job, which I was surprised about because they'd never offered somebody like me a job. And the reason is because I'm a bricks and mortar person. I was raised in a bricks and mortar environment. I'd always gone to a bricks and mortar school. The only work I'd done online, I'd failed miserably at. I couldn't do it. It was too hard, to be honest, for me. And I was interested. I accepted the job because I was interested to see how this thing worked. And I was interested in knowing if people who were engaging in education online were actually learning. Because I was a skeptic. I'm a traditionalist, right? And so I spent 6 months in on the faculty working with students, and I found that students are actually learning. And one of the reasons I know that they were learning was I could see that they're learning. And the biggest indicator of learning sometimes in a classroom is the instructor, is the professor learning. And I was learning. I was learning a lot from my students. They were engaging in ways that was interesting and made me understand that there was a lot going on. And so I became a big proponent of online education for the population that it serves. And I believe that that's the case. It was surprising to me, but it's been shown to me.
Nice.
And then after a few years on the faculty, the dean of the business school became the associate provost and then provost, and could no longer manage the business school, and asked me to take on the job of dean of the business school. And so I've been the dean of the Mark Skousen Business School for 2 years, a little over 2 years now.
You did mention talking about the online versus brick and mortar environment. We did get a question prior to today about, going through the business program in an online format versus a brick and mortar format, and how that prepares you for your career moving forward. Can you compare and contrast those two when students think about preparing in one versus the other?
Certainly. Well, one of the things is that the content, the actual content of the courses and the programs is virtually identical. Organizational behavior is taught in our business school as it is in virtually every other business school in the United States and abroad. Accounting, finance, all of these things are taught with virtually the same material, using many of the same authors, many of the same textbooks, and I'll get into why that's important in a little bit. So the content is the same. The big difference is in how students interact. When you're in a bricks and mortar environment, you're forced, literally forced, to interact with the person next to you. You see that person every other day, or 3 days a week or something like that, and you're sitting next to that person. You're basically forced to interact with that person and the person behind you and the people in the halls. That provides an opportunity for people to get to know each other, to network, and to build relationships. Here in our environment, our students need to be a lot more intentional about building those relationships. And what's important for me is that our students really engage in the discussion forums that are embedded in every course, so that they actually interact with people, so they get to know that Jeremy is a nice guy, and that Doug is a deep thinker, and that Jeremy has these plans in his life, for future business opportunities. So you get the opportunity to kind of mix that up.
Right.
The second opportunity is to take advantage of our student organizations. If you're in HR and interested in that, participate in our SHRM student chapter. If you're a project management person, participate in PMI. If you're into accounting, we're developing an accounting organization as well. And then the university has student organizations that everybody can participate in. Take advantage of those in order to build the networks you have. Many of these organizations also have local organizations, so that if you're a member of SHRM through Grantham, you can actually attend the local SHRM chapter in the city where you live and start to network in that way. So you might not be always networking with other students, but it's an introduction for how you can actually network with other professionals and learn. Not all project managers do the same thing. Not all human resource managers do the same thing. And it's interesting to kind of learn what different paths are available to people, even within the same discipline.
It's really good. I know here in Kansas City, the SHRM Johnson County and Kansas City chapters have come together on numerous occasions to do roundtables specifically for college students. And they will have folks from every discipline, from compensation and benefits, talent development, even, VPs and heads of HR to give students a full view of what those programs are like. And a lot of those organizations are like that, and they're very inexpensive, if not
for
if not
students,
free.
they're really inexpensive. They are very, very reasonable, and they're designed so that students get involved in the chapters early on in their career, and they love to see students there. You will be very, very welcome. But if we think about human resources and the different parts of human resources, from developing a pool, the whole recruitment process, to the whole selection process and staffing, and then hiring, and then developing afterwards, and promotions. Those are all specialties within human resource management, and everybody goes down a particular path. And what our programs are designed to do is to present you with the overall knowledge of the human resource management area, but then you're going to have to decide where it is you're going to go. And as you guys know, each of you being involved in human resources to some extent, there are many paths within HR, as there are within project management or accounting or general management.
And it should be just a quick Google search. That's how we found as a university with our local chapters. We just did a quick SHRM, Kansas City Google search. It was very easy. So if you do a Google search, it should be fine.
Certainly, and I don't want to put more work on you guys, but if you're listening to this, these guys are really happy to direct you to any student organization where you need to be and what might fit your needs.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the big difference between a grounded campus and an online environment, is you really need to be intentional about developing those relationships. Where in the ground environment, they just are
just have
there.
Okay, awesome.
Well, my first question is, do you know any French?
Oui. Je peux parler français si vous voulez.
All right, well, that sounded good enough for me.
Aucun problème, hein. Ça dépend de qui est allié avec nous sur l'intranet, je ne sais pas.
I guess you do then. That's great. Well, I that would be my first question, and I'm glad you answered that. That's pretty good. And you were there 14 years?
Almost 14 years total, yeah.
That's
with the first stint and the end, yeah.
Excellent. Well, the question I really wanted to start with was why study business and business management?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. I think one of the basic ideas behind studying business and business management is that, first of all, if you think about what a business degree actually offers you, from a freshman through senior undergrad, or even as an MBA or master's student, it offers you one of the most all-encompassing degrees that you can have. You will study math, you will study natural science, you will study social sciences, you'll study all these different kinds of ways of looking at the world, and much of it in a particular organizational context. And the interesting thing about that is that each of you today are involved in some organizational or some social context. So you have something you can bring to all of those studies. And that's one of the things that studying business does for us. Now, what's the outcome? Because people will actually ask, what do I get from a business degree? I'm going to eliminate one idea real quickly. Studying business will not make you a good manager. Becoming a good manager requires experience. Becoming a good manager requires you to be a bad manager at least once or twice in your life. You have to manage people. You have to see what somebody who's been good at it has done, and you have to understand the mistakes you've made. Now, what a business school degree does for us is it teaches us a way to look at the world, a way that business people order the problems around us. It gives us a vocabulary, the way people in business talk, the words we use. We all know about balance sheets. We know about assets. We know about debits and credits. We know about supply and demand. We understand how markets are affected by various economic factors and things. And so it's a way to look at the world. It's a way to be able to discuss with other business people of the world. And it's a way to be confronted with the theories that have worked and most of the theories that have not worked, and what parts of those theories that continue to apply depending on the context where you're working, where you are, and those theories that don't apply because of the context where you are. And so my goal for our students is that they are able to develop what I call develop their nose, so that they can smell when something is not quite right and understand that we need to fix whatever's not quite right. So the bottom line is that a good business school education, which I believe we deliver, will help students understand how to determine what the actual problem is and come up with solutions to that problem.
I like that. You have to be a bad manager to be a good manager. Learn what doesn't work to figure out what does work. And our education can help out with that. I like that.
Well, I think each of us have had that experience.
Yeah,
You know, if you've been a manager, there are mistakes that I've made as a manager. I've been a manager in enterprises, and I've been a manager in academic settings. And there are a lot of mistakes I've made, and there are things I wish I could undo. But it's important that people understand that. And the importance of studying business, that was, what do we learn from business? Now, why should you study business? And the reason you should study business is because it is one of the most relevant things that you can do in order to prepare yourself for the decisions you will make that affect other people's lives. And the decisions you make as a business person and as a manager have effects on other people. I cannot think of very many professions that have a deeper impact on a day-to-day basis on individuals than that of a manager or a business person. The decisions you make determine whether an individual will get married. They determine that based on their job, whether they're going to have a baby, whether they're going to buy a car, buy a house, change the city where they've lived their entire life to move to another city, another state, another country, based on the manager. So the impact that you have on people's lives as a manager is profound. And I often tell my students that I think of myself as a nice guy. I think my colleagues, for the most part, think I'm a pretty nice guy.
We agree.
Thank you. At least in the hallways, I'm a pretty nice guy. But when it comes to the business of what we're doing, running a business school, teaching classes, I take it very seriously because of that impact that people have on other people's lives. And I don't want any of our students to take that lightly.
That's good. And then there's that statistic, I can't remember the exact numbers, but people will tell you that when people make the decision to leave their organization, it's usually because of ineffective leadership or management. It's usually that direct relation that they have with their manager that will determine whether they stay or go. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I've stayed in jobs where many of the outcomes, the personal outcomes, the outcomes for me were less desirable than I could have achieved elsewhere, but because of the manager and because of the project that I believed in, I stayed where I was because I really enjoyed what I was doing and who I was working for and believed in that. in that process, in that project. And I really, when we look at all the forms of compensation, and we talk about motivation and things like that, the role of the manager is much higher than many of the other forms of what we might consider benefits. A bad manager will definitely drive you away. A good manager has at least the opportunity to keep you involved and interested.
Yeah, and I was going to say that statistic is, I think, above 70%. And I just looked it up, and Gallup poll has it at 75% of the reasons people quit come down to their managers. So it is quite high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
So I just wanted to make sure we looked that up for
Yeah.
Well, no, it's true.
It is, yeah, I knew it was high.
And what we think of, Deming, W. Edwards Deming, who I hope many of you will learn about in your business school
They
studies.
should. I did my HR program stuff.
Fantastic. Often would say that, as managers, we're the ones who create the systems. And then we complain about the behavior of the people who operate in the systems we created. And
That's
so,
the second time I've heard that in the last week.
is it?
Yeah.
Because I've been saying it a lot.
Maybe you were the one who said it.
Yeah, we could have heard it with Dean Martin.
Yeah, I think so.
I've been saying it a lot because what we experience it, every organization experiences it. This is not unique to any particular organization. And it's been true certainly of every organization that I have managed, where I have set up the system and then I can't believe the behavior I get from particular individuals in the system that I created. And so that's the nature of management. And so I learn. We learn. We said that doesn't work. So we change. And that's the other part of having a sound business education, is understanding that the need to change is not a failure. The need to change and the ability to change is really important. You have to have the capacity to adapt to whatever's going on in your environment.
Yeah, that's how we develop.
Absolutely. And having a sound business background, business education, will help you become fearless in that, and understanding that, yes, it's change, and yes, we're moving in a different direction, but we have to. So we pivot, like a good running back. I hate sports metaphors, by the way.
Okay.
Well, I like that. So what is the history of business education?
The history of business education. Because you might think that business education is a long history, but it really isn't. Before we studied business, people were still trying to figure out how to organize people and things like that. So sometimes we think of Henry Ford as the inventor of some major business practices. And what he did was he improved some, but he didn't invent them. Julius Caesar was a very good organization theorist. Julius Caesar knew where to put people, how to put people, and the whole idea of task specialization is Roman. It far preceded Adam Smith and Taylor and those guys. So that part of understanding business is ancient, but the actual study of business came out of the Napoleonic era in the early 19th century, the 1800s in France, where he was noticing that the universities at that time were specializing in philosophy and religion and primarily those two areas, and some other kind of social things. And he felt like they needed to develop people who could actually do things and not only think about things. And so the business and engineering and medicine and lots of the professional schools were developed in the early 1800s based on that kind of idea. And ESCP in Paris, where I've actually given talks and still have good colleagues, is the oldest existing business school. It was established in 1819.
Wow.
And the oldest one in the United States was the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania in 1891. But the study of business really took off with Taylorism in the early 1900s. And then during the two world wars, there was a lull in the study of business, and after World War II, an explosion in business schools and business studies. In the 1950s, many state institutions and many universities were establishing business schools, starting in the 1950s. In 1968, the Nobel folks decided to start awarding the Nobel Prize in economics, and they now do it in social sciences. And some of the people who are actually have great impact on business that have won the Nobel Prize in economics were Kenneth Arrow in '72, Milton Friedman, who's really an economist, but we still study him in business school. You know, was very influential. Herbert Simon was the guy who coined the term administrative science, and he earned the Nobel in 1978, basically for his understanding of how decisions are made, especially business decisions. Gary Becker is a guy I quote often because Gary Becker won his Nobel for the idea of human capital and the importance of human capital instead of just monetary capital in a firm, and that was Becker. But he also wrote some interesting papers about what's the value of a college education. And so I like Gary Becker. And anyway, to take off on Becker, the question of what's the value of a college education was, is it inherent in the college education itself, or is it because it's a signal that you're willing to put up with all the hardships and the difficulties that it takes to earn a college education? Mm-hmm. And the funny thing is that his big study was indeterminate. He couldn't tell, because many times it's a signal, they consider a signal, and many times they think it's because of the stuff you learn. What this tells me, though, is that for students to find good jobs after having a college education, what they need to understand is that we're going to prepare you to understand the vocabulary and the ideas behind business, but that organization is then going to prepare you to be a part of them. They're going to make you a part of Apple. They're going to make you a part of IBM. They're going to make you a part of Joe's Really Good Insurance.
Yeah.
You know, whatever you decide to work in. So there's that industry-specific knowledge, and then there's this generalist knowledge. But Becker was a cool guy. I included on my list a guy named Vernon Smith, who was an economist, but he graduated from the University of Kansas and took me to lunch one day. And so I've always been thankful for that opportunity to meet him.
Well, you touched on this earlier, but how does a business education prepare a student? Anything further for that?
Yeah.
You touched on it quite a bit.
I think the idea of what it prepares you for, I'm going to go back to this idea of developing all of your senses. So often we talk about being data-driven. And when we're data-driven, we're only using one sense. There's this belief that everything we do is logical. And so one of the problems we have with economists is that economists think that everybody acts rationally. We might not know the rationale for why a person is acting in a certain way, but it's all rational. What a good business school background does for us is it helps you develop all of your senses. Not just your eyes, not just the rational sense, not just looking at data and saying, well, the data tell us to do this, but also understanding that the data were developed in a particular context that's not reflected on the sheet we're looking at. The data represent a sample of something that is not the whole, and that if we use something that's a measure of satisfaction, job satisfaction, the measure of job satisfaction is not the same thing as job satisfaction. And so what you learn in business school is to sniff those kinds of things out, so that You understand the entire context. You can get comfortable with the data that are telling us to do something, whether it's to sell something or increase the price of something, reduce the price of something, just understanding the entire context of where we are and things that the data cannot directly tell us. I've been in hundreds of meetings with accountants who bring in balance sheets to tell us exactly how the business is doing, and it tells us only one part of how the business is doing. It does not tell us the whole story. It might tell us a good story about how we should feel today and how my bank account's doing, but it does not give us an accurate history of where we've been, nor does it really give us a good idea of where we're going in and of itself. And that's why it's important that we understand all the parts of what's going on in business. You might want to be a finance person. You might want to be an accountant. You might want to be a marketing person. But none of those entities operate in a vacuum. They're all part of an interdependent system. So it's important for all of our students to understand each of these different parts of the business activity that help organizations thrive.
Yeah, I like that. Develop all the senses, and the things that kept coming to mind as you were answering that question was a term that's been thrown around the past 2 or 3 years is emotional intelligence. Maybe it would help with overall emotional intelligence, and that of course helps in regular business life as well.
Sure. Well, Daniel Goldman was very influential in this, and yeah, it's emotional intelligence is something that it's catching. It's not as cool to say it as it was, even 4 or 5 years ago, because emotional intelligence now is reaching that 20-25-year range, and virtually every theory in business or organizations has a shelf life of around 20 to 30 years before people start feeling like it doesn't apply anymore. So it's being critiqued. The idea behind emotional intelligence and much of what's been written about is extremely important, though, because he does talk about, he doesn't use those terms, but you're right, he does capture the essence of being open to everything that's going around to you. And we see so many people walking down the halls that have no idea about a person who's 2 feet away from them and have no sense of themselves or themselves in a particular situation. And I see that with many businesses and business people who operate as if they're the only thing there. The fact is that you don't know who's about to turn the corner. And that's the fun thing. You don't know. It could be opportunity, it could be a threat. But having this background in studying business will help you develop that sense to know that you should be looking for those things.
What are the main industry areas covered in your program?
Yeah, it's funny because people will sometimes say that they want to work in a particular industry, but a business program in general develops people to work across industries and not in a particular industry. There are exceptions to that, and I'll get to that. But the general business program is going to help you work in virtually any industry you want, and that organization is going to tell you what they want you to do and how they want it done. They're going to assume you have this knowledge because you have a Grantham University degree in business. But in terms of certain specializations, we have specializations in logistics and supply chain management that prepare people to work in management in those areas, in supply chain and logistics. A very popular program is our Certified Financial Planning program, which prepares you to work as a financial planner. It's recently been reaffirmed by the CFP board. We have many programs that have been reviewed and affirmed by the professional associations, which we can talk about in a little bit. Operations management is another area that it's not a particular organization, but it's a particular way to look at how an industry runs. Yeah, those are the ones that are kind of industry specific. The other kinds of things we teach are more broad in particular areas, such as marketing or human resource management and general management.
And you touched a little bit about, with general education credits like math, science, and English for the major, but why is that? Why do students need those basic?
Fantastic question, because it's one that comes up periodically. In fact, a student called me several days ago, maybe a week or two ago, to complain about the requirement for a natural science series of credits. And here's the thing. As business people, we operate in an environment that are not closed off. Business, one of the things that some businesses like to think is that we are apart from society, where in fact, businesses are an integral part of the social fabric and society of where we live. And so to think that you can operate independently and be one entity as a business person and then close the door at 5 o'clock, walk out on the street and be somebody else is false. You're not. You are, what you do as a business person is who you are. That's one thing. The second thing is, when we talk about learning to understand how to organize problems and even find a problem, what math teaches us is a different way to look at problems. I don't care if you get the equation right. Please do not say this to your math teacher. But that's not the point. The point is learning how to look at different problems in different ways. So yes, it is important to come up with the right answer to those questions, because once you figure out how to do that problem in that way, we're going to give you a different set of problems. They're solved in different ways. Okay? And it's the same thing with science. The kind of science is less important to me, whether it's biology or botany or general science or whatever. But what's important for me is the students understand the scientific method. That way we can order what we do, how we do it, and how we arrive at a decision. The observation that something is going on that I don't quite understand. The part where the hypothesis, where you put that together, you formulate that in a way that can be tested. The actual testing of that idea leading to new observations. And so we have this circle of how we approach a problem, come to organize the problem in a way we can actually start to understand it, do the testing on that problem, and then formulating new ideas about that problem. Those are the reasons that being able to do math and having science background is really important for a business person. It's all about how are we looking at arranging and organizing problems. Because problems don't come up to you and yell, hey, I'm a problem, and solve me.
Yeah.
Problems are the things that you figure out. There's some nagging issue that needs to be done. And I've worked with some tremendous people whose main benefit to me was they knew when there was a problem and they knew how to get to that problem. Some of them didn't even know how to solve the problem. But to be honest with you, solving the problem is the easiest part of that whole process.
Yeah.
Figuring out what the real problem is the most difficult part. Yeah, I think you have to do that every day throughout your life. have to figure out what those problems are and solve them. So,
That's the great thing about business education is that there's nothing new. There's nothing that's not applicable that I'm doing in my business education that is not applicable to my life as a human being and trying to be a better person.
Yeah, great. What is the typical class size, and what is the usual instructor to student ratio?
Well, like most schools, the class sizes in the lower levels are larger, and as you get to be a junior and senior, the class sizes are smaller. So we're trying very hard to hold the class size at about 25 students in the first and second year classes. There's some where the class size grows to 30, and I've seen even more than that in a couple classes. It's not my desire. And the reason I like the smaller classes is because it gives you not only the opportunity to talk to each other, but actually forces you to network with each other more. Where if we have 30 people in a class or 50 people in a class, Doug and Jeremy can sit back and talk to each other. But if we only have 15 or 20 people in the class, Doug and Jeremy actually have to talk to other people in the class. And so it becomes a very important pedagogical tool and a tool to help people learn how to network. So in our junior and senior level classes, I think our average class size tends to be around 15, and in our graduate school classes between 10 and 15.
Great. Okay. Are there any changes coming up in the Mark Skousen School of Business degree programs?
We're constantly changing, Doug. There's nothing we're not looking at. In fact, it drives many of the people at the university kind of crazy because we're constantly looking to see how we can better respond to the needs of our environment. Like any other organization, if we allow ourselves to be complacent about what we do, then we will fade away. So we're constantly looking not only at new things that are student-focused, and I'll talk about those in just a second, but we're also constantly looking at better ways to do what it is we do. Some of the student-focused things that are coming up are obviously the Bachelor of Business Administration program has been approved by all the accreditors now and will come online in September. So we'll be offering, in our undergraduate program, we'll still be offering one associate degree, which is a combination associate of business administration and management. And then in the undergrad, we're offering a Bachelor of Business Administration in general management, marketing, logistics and supply chain management, financial planning, procurement and contract management, operations management, and human resource management. So students will be able to get those concentrations attached to their transcript so that when an employer asks, okay, you've got a BBA, which is a generalist degree, what area are you really interested in? And if you're very interested in a particular area, then you can say this. We also have a Bachelor's of Science in Accounting, which has recently been accredited as its own program by IACBE. So we're one of fewer than 300 schools worldwide to have both our general program accredited and our accounting program accredited. Worldwide, out of the tens of thousands of business schools worldwide. It's a lot of work, and I'm really proud of our team for that accomplishment.
That's fantastic.
So our next look is to the master's. So we've reorganized the undergraduate business program. Soon we'll be doing that in the MBA program as well.
Will there be more concentrations for the MBA?
There will be, yeah. An MBA is a generalist degree. It's considered a terminal professional degree. But similarly, there are people who want to work in finance, or there are people who want to work in accounting, and they need more graduate hours in those particular areas. And so we'll be providing that.
Cool.
Can students transfer real-life work experience or test out of required classes?
students cannot test out, but students can apply real-life experience. And we have a program called PLA, which is
Prior learning assessment.
Prior learning assessment. I was going to say professional, thank you. Prior learning assessment. And what happens is that students prepare a small file outlining for each course that they think that they have experience in, what that experience is, and how it corresponds to the objectives of the course. That file then is reviewed by a faculty member who will say, yes, this actually corresponds to the needs of the course, and the student can earn credit for that course. But prior learning assessment actually corresponds to a particular set of learning to a particular course. So you do this PLA for a particular course. Some of the common courses are in human resource management. Some of the specialized HR courses are common. Some of the finance courses or accounting courses might be kind of common. If somebody's done extensive bookkeeping work for a company for years, you might be able to get PLA for the introduction to accounting. They already know about T accounts, for example. I hope everyone online knows about T accounts. And I'm not an accountant.
Yeah. On the way.
Now, we get this question a lot with students in our engineering or computer science degree programs, but what skills should a student be developing in the workplace to assist them with their next career move after they earn a degree or while they're still taking classes?
Sure. Okay. So I've talked to a lot of employers about what it is that our students need and what many students lack. And that comes down to two things. One, I've kind of addressed a bit, and that is employers are looking for students who know how to look at an environment and determine what the problem is, figure out how to get to the root of that problem, go out and gather the data necessary around that problem, organize those data for that problem, analyze the data after they've organized it, and then provide a solution, propose a solution. A problem without a proposed solution is just a pain.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that just makes people angry.
Yeah.
We don't want to do that. We need problems and solutions. The second thing, which is a part of this, is a trait. And that trait is something that you can develop. So you're not just born with it, but many people are. And that trait is curiosity. You have to be curious. People want people who are curious. Why does this happen? It's not like being a 3-year-old and asking why all the time. Again, you're just making people angry.
Yeah.
But the idea of just wondering why it is that something exists the way it exists. On my way in to this very meeting, I got pulled into an office, and the question of why does this exist in this particular way? And my answer was, and I chuckled, was because it's historical. There's no other reason. There's no reason in my mind that I can think of for why that exists. I've asked the question, I'd asked the very same question, but I hadn't been pushy enough to get to the answer. And so I kind of looked bad at that moment when somebody asked me why it existed, and the only response I can give is because it was that way when I came. That's not a very satisfying answer.
Yeah, just because I said so.
Well, that's essentially what it was.
Yeah.
A former provost said that's the way something should be, and we all just said okay, you know. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure there are reasons why that person said it should be that way. We just don't know what they are. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to figure that out. My point is, curiosity, channeled curiosity, is irreplaceable in an organization. It's irreplaceable. And you can make yourself incredibly important to a company or to your own business by just wondering why it is something exists the way it does, and then pursuing that. We talk about interesting questions and questions that are interesting. Interesting questions are the ones that we talk about after 5 o'clock when we're having a soda pop down on the corner, right? Well, that's kind of interesting. But questions that are interesting are the ones that are meaningful, that we can dive into, that we can start to actually determine answers to and resolve.
So let's talk about the faculty. Also, any recent announcements of the faculty ranks and what that means?
Sure. Well, I'm happy about the faculty ranking process, so thanks for bringing that up. Sure. A little over 4 years ago, Grantham University made an investment to bring in full-time faculty. Prior to that, all of our faculty, almost all of our faculty, had been adjunct faculty. And many online schools run this way with 100% full online faculty. And even schools that will promote on their websites their faculty, if you look deeply at them, they're actually only part-time faculty for that school and working at many other schools. We made the investment in full-time faculty, and we have about 30 full-time faculty in various areas, 10 in the School of Business. And when they were brought on as instructors, and many of them were generalists in business. And over the past 4 years, we've made an effort to help those individuals develop into their specialties. We have several professors who've been taking additional finance classes and engaging in finance. We have professors who have engaged in entrepreneurial courses and events. And we have a couple who've earned their doctorates while they've been here with us. And so we developed a way to recognize those individuals through the faculty ranking process. For certain faculty, because what they feel like they want to do is purely teach, and the only thing they want to do is teach, have remained as instructors. But we have faculty who are interested in progressing in academia and participating in the full life of the university, that we've made assistant professors and associate professors. And that's recognition for not only their degree, which is important to have a doctorate to be an associate professor or a professor, to have experience and to be involved in their area. We have faculty who are deeply involved in SHRM. We have faculty who are deeply involved in PMI, the Project Management Institute. We have faculty who are engaged in entrepreneurial things. So those are the faculty ranking issues. The other thing that this ranking does is it provides a pathway that shows individuals how they can climb, I'm using quotation marks to all of our friends, how they can climb the ranks. I don't like the term because it creates a hierarchy, and we don't make our these are all colleagues. Right. In the School of Business, they all have equal say in everything we do. Nobody has a bigger say. So I say climb, but there's some people who want to be more involved in committee work. There's some people who want to be more involved in assessment, and some people who want to be more involved in curriculum and curriculum development. And so in order to do that, they have to have different ranks. And the ranks provide the pathway that allows individuals to engage in these other activities that are essential to us being a full university.
Great. My last question is, any recommended professional certifications?
Yes, of course, all of them. Depending on what you're going to do, it's important to have the professional certification. And so we've aligned our logistics program with ASIC. We've aligned our project management program with PMI. We've aligned our HR program with SHRM. We've aligned our financial planning program with the CFP board. And so all of those various certifications are extremely important for those people. We're working on our marketing program to get it aligned with one of the major marketing associations. And our Bachelor of Science in Accounting program is aligned so that students in their junior year can actually apply for certification as a management accountant, a CMA. And our program is aligned for certified management accountants and is aligned for the government finance and accounting certification as well. So those are the certifications that we're immediately aligned for. If somebody wants to become a certified public accountant, a CPA, our program is aligned with and accepted by multiple regionally accredited schools that will accept our graduates directly into their Masters of Science in Accounting program. We currently don't have a Masters of Science in Accounting, and I think a vast majority of the states require 150 credit hours for somebody to apply to sit for the CPA, which is essentially a master's. And so the huge majority of students get a Master's of Science in Accounting, and our credits are transferable to these institutions that allows those students to do that, if that's their goal. The goal of most people who are in accounting, though, is to become a certified management accountant. That allows you to work in a business. It's a professional certification. You're going to work in a small business, large businesses. Most large businesses use certified management accountants and not CPAs. The only people who use CPAs are people who are doing auditing. So.
I have many friends that are in the accounting. They're accountants at companies. They're not a certified public accountant, but they're managing accountants, and they enjoy that career immensely.
Yeah. And our program prepares them for that.
Excellent.
Awesome. Well, just a couple more questions I would ask you before we adjourn. So from the dean's perspective, and I'm kind of throwing this at you, I don't know if we have this before, but if you were to give any, words of wisdom, because I know we've got listeners, that are either considering a degree in business with Grantham, they're either started or working on or in the process of getting their degree here at Grantham, or of course you have the folks who are on the verge of graduation. If you were to give some words of wisdom for folks in those three stages, what would you say? Or for all, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I think thanks, Jeremy. This allows me to kind of highlight the two major themes of our discussion this morning. Mm-hmm. And one is to keep yourself open. Open up all of your senses. Don't keep your head down. Walk with your head up. Walk with your senses open. When you walk in the halls of your organization or wherever you are, keep your head up and be curious about the environment where you're operating. Those two things will help you in each of the stages. In your coursework, it'll help you immensely in your coursework, and will help you integrate what you're learning in the courses into your daily life. As the dean, sometimes people ask me what it is I do as a dean. And if I'm going to put that into one sentence, what I do as a dean is to defend and build the diploma that you're working for in the School of Business at Grantham University. My job is to ensure that the diploma that you earn means something to people who are on the outside. My job is to make sure that everybody who earns that diploma has worked as hard as you have and hasn't taken shortcuts and hasn't engaged in behavior that does not help us promote the diploma. And I'm vigilant about this, and we work on this every single day. It ties into the quality of our curriculum, the constant improvement in what our classrooms actually look like, and in making sure that everybody is engaging in the same learning environment as everyone else, and so that everybody who gets through it earns a diploma. Some people need our tutoring service more than others. That's normal. Use the tutoring service. It's there for you. We provide this. Go into that. Engage in things that help you learn, and not in shortcuts that will not help you learn.
Nice. Thank you. We did have one question from our listeners. For the students that are in any business programs, is there somewhere where they can find this information about the alignment with the program to the certifications?
It's on the website.
Okay.
Yeah.
Grantham.edu?
Grantham.edu.
Okay.
Yeah.
So under
The CFP isn't on there. It's on some places, but not everywhere. And I'll get that remedied. But yeah.
Awesome. Well, that concludes our session today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to have this talk with you.
Yeah. Just a quick reminder, I wanted to let everyone know before we adjourn today about our career launch program. So a lot of the things that Dr. Marker has discussed today are things that we can definitely continue to discuss with you through the university, either through your student advisors or your admissions reps, or even through us in career services. If you have any questions about your career path and some of the resources that may be available, we can definitely talk to you about that as far as the associations that we discussed today, ways to network, a lot of those things that we can do to assist you and even help you, start your career planning process with your resumes, your job search strategies. Doug and I would be happy to connect with you. And if you have any other questions direct for David Marker, definitely send those to us, or you can email Dr. Marker directly at dmarker@grantham.edu. But we want to thank you again for joining us today, and we'll see you soon.
Take care.